That's Nick.
And that's Joseph, and today we're here to talk about An American Pickle, which will be premiering on HBO Max August 6th, 2020. It's the first solo directorial effort of Brandon Trost, who is pretty much known as a revered cinematographer who has lensed quite a few other previous films starring Seth Rogen, who's of course in dual roles in this film, which was penned by SNL writer Simon Rich, based on one of his short stories.
This film is rated PG-13.
It's the first Seth Rogen produced movie to be rated such.
I will try to tell the story now. So, Seth Rogen plays a character named Herschel Greenbaum. Mm-hmm. So we find Herschel in 1919, in a place called
Schlupsk,
which is like Eastern Europe somewhere. It's a rough life he lives, manual labor, very little pay, very meager life.
Is he a ditch digger?
He digs ditches. Yeah. He meets a woman named Sarah. They have dreams and goals that are very basic. All she wants in life is to, what did she say her dream is?
Her dream is to work very hard. And
so she can buy a tombstone.
So she can buy her own tombstone.
And Herschel's dream is to one day have seltzer water. Mm-hmm. Okay. But the Cossacks, those Russian... explain what Cossacks are.
They're... The history of the Cossacks is kind of confusing, but around this period, which is World War I, it's kind of East Slavic, some of whom were Russian, but they were actually people that...
You're giving a much more in-depth explanation. Yeah. The film just says they're Russians who hated and killed Jews.
They're Christians that were killing Jews, according to this film. By the time World War II rolled around, they were kind of Cossacks on different sides, and then they kind of were dissolved, and then only in the past 30 years or so have people begun to reclaim a Cossack heritage. But yeah, the Russians.
So the Cossacks are wreaking havoc in Herschel's village, so he and Sarah decide to flee to America, and they land at Ellis Island. Mm-hmm. Herschel gets a job working at a pickle factory.
As a rat killer?
As a rat killer, because I think they won't let him handle the food. Mm-hmm. It's kosher, or they give some reason why he's not allowed to touch the food, so he just has to kill rats. But one day at work, he falls into like a pickling vat, mm-hmm. and the pickling vat gets sealed because they don't realize he's in there, and then the building is shut down. So fast forward 100 years, the pickle vat is open because apparently this building in NYC was left vacant for 100 years. And Herschel's still alive. Mm-hmm. And what I thought was a really funny plot point is the scientists on the news are attempting to explain the science behind how this could happen. And then as they do, the film cuts to okay, that was a great explanation, mm-hmm. which I thought was funny, and I was hoping the film had more of that tone.
Of that energy, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so Herschel's only living relative is a young man named Ben, who is his great-grandson. Ben is played by Seth Rogen as well.
I think it's great.
I think it's just great.
On IMDb it said great. But okay, I don't remember, but...
Whatever. His grandson, Ben, who's also played by Seth Rogen, he's sort of released into his care. And immediately it just begins you don't know what Uber is, you don't know what an iPad is, kind of that thing. Mm-hmm. The first thing Herschel wants to do is visit because he did end up buying plots because it was Sarah's dream to have her own tombstone. He wants to visit the plot where he believes his wife Sarah is buried. So Ben takes him, and now it's just somewhere in New York, sort of this dirty, dingy corner with overpasses. So he's disappointed to see that there has been no maintenance at his wife's gravesite. But what makes Herschel most upset is there is a billboard for Russian vodka right over her tombstone. Mm-hmm. So he's well, you have to take this down. And Ben's that's not how this works. We don't own this land. We don't own this billboard. You can't do that. Well, what would it take? Well, $200,000 and you can buy this and do whatever you want. So Herschel says, well, you're a disgrace to the family that you would let this happen, and I'm going to earn the money to do this. Okay, sure, great-great-granddad. Well, Ben and Herschel have a falling out because Ben's job is a software designer. and he's come up with this app called BoopBot, which is like how you can tell if products are ethical or not. But when Ben explains to Herschel, who was like a hardworking man all his life, that, oh yeah, I've been working on this app for 5 years that I still haven't pitched. He's like, well, that's lame. Like, you should do it. He convinces him to do it and he fails. And he fails because Ben and Herschel get into a fight and they get arrested. So when Ben goes to have his meeting for his app, the investor's like, well, we can't invest in your app because it's an ethical product and the creator has like a criminal record. So Ben's upset at Herschel and says like, I want nothing to do with you. Another funny line is Herschel keeps telling Ben like, I'm gonna prove you stupid. And he does. Herschel goes out on his own and in the first day like finds all this. He finds like pickles or cucumbers in the trash can and salt over here and old jars and rainwater. And he makes pickles and he sells them. And because it's New York and all these hipsters or whomever want to like, you know, buy artisanal and buy trendy shit, his pickles sell out. But now there's a war between Ben and Herschel because Ben calls like the state, whoever is in charge, the Department of Health, and they shut down Herschel. Then he calls he sets Herschel up to like make racist and homophobic comments on Twitter. He does all these things to destroy Herschel, but it just makes him stronger until he goes too far. Herschel goes too far, and now cancel culture has forced Herschel to like leave because he ends up getting like deported. So Ben says, well, I'll help you cross the Canadian border. So the two of them go. They get caught by the Canadian Border Patrol, and Herschel has the bright idea to pretend that he's Ben. So Ben is the one who gets arrested because they think he's Herschel, and ultimately gets deported back to Schlups. But the film ends with Herschel realizing that Ben's dream, because he goes through his stuff and sees that like Boobop the app was really something that he had dreamed about as a kid, and it was to honor his parents who gave him money. So Herschel has a change of heart and basically tells Ben like, I'm proud of you. Ben says, well, I'm proud of you. You have the work ethic. I have the technological savvy. Let's work together. We can be a hit. The end. All right.
About 15 minutes into this film, I was like, well, this is a lot of Seth Rogen.
A scene that I don't even know where to begin.
Seth Rogen.
I think my biggest annoyance, okay, so the first thing is, right away, you said something that I think sums up how I feel about this movie perfectly. You said it's a lot of Seth Rogen. It is, it's too much. And I like Seth Rogen, and I think his character as Herschel is really amusing.
And endearing.
Yeah. But we should have had someone else play Ben. Yeah,
because really Ben is just a composite of Seth Rogen, like this kind of schlubby, self-deprecating, not loser, but just down on his luck man-child.
Yeah. So my first note is I found it really annoying right away that Ben, he seems to be unaware that his great-great-grandfather doesn't know anything about modern life. He keeps saying like, oh, you don't know what that is? You don't know what that is? It's just annoying. And it just keeps going.
Yes, yeah. Or the fact that the world would just be like, okay, here's this guy that was soaked in brine and we're just going to... The suspension of disbelief for a lot of things in the film aren't supported by the lack of laughs.
Well, so I was fine believing that this man was, alive in a pickle jar for 100 years. That didn't bother me. What bothered me is like, wouldn't he have been world famous? Wouldn't he be like, everyone would want a piece of him? He'd have an agent, he would... But no, they just let him leave the hospital with no one to take care of him.
But even if that's not the scope of the narrative they're going for, at least have the Ben character is not interested in him in the least.
No. This man is like a miracle, and he just acts like he's just some like old relative I don't want to be bothered with. I didn't like that. I've seen Encino Man and I don't quite remember it. But I will say, this film didn't go where I thought it would go. Like, it's not as predictable. I didn't expect them to be at odds. I thought it was going to be more of like a slapsticky, like, oh, this like old-timey man living in modern times and just fucking everything up. It's not that. It's a little darker.
Sure.
You know.
It's darker, but it doesn't make good use of parallels or metaphors or anything. Because even if, like, all the talk about the Cossacks, and then we situate Herschel as a prime candidate for his problematic prose has led to people supporting him, not unlike, Trump per se. It looks like it's leading towards him running for some kind of political office until he says that there's no Christ, and then of course there's the hypocrisy. But where was I going with that?
I don't know.
The fact that it's not like it couldn't even make those kind of comparisons about the Cossacks and Russian interference in the American political system today. It could have been kind of sophisticated, but it just
because it's not funny enough. So I feel like, well, it could have been smarter then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like either it's going to be like a laugh riot of just ridiculousness, or it can be smarter and more scathing, more satirical. But it's kind of like middle right. Like it's not. There aren't big laughs.
No, every now and then as Herschel, like he does something that's
humorous.
Funny.
Yeah. But I mean, there are no big laughs, at least that I can recall. Mm-hmm.
And also, let's you bring up Encino Man, which is it's a Pauly Shore comedy. A Neanderthal man being thought out in the modern day. That's a trope that's been used before. There's a Fred Scapisi film from '84 with John Lone and Timothy Hutton. That's a serious drama, but the same thing. But that's all centered on what we could learn from someone like that.
Yeah. The score I would give this film is lower, and I think a big part of that is Ben's character is so vengeful against Herschel, and I just didn't like that. Mm-hmm. I just didn't like it. It felt so like he's so angry towards this miracle man who clearly doesn't know what he's talking. He's out of touch, and Ben is not like an empathetic person, so it was kind of hard to watch.
Yeah, I agree.
Because they're like enemies, but it's like, how are you enemies with this man who is like from 100 years ago?
And a very notable supporting cast of players that are all kind of neglected. Like Marsha Stephanie Blake shows up as the Department of Health person that shuts him down. It's like you didn't give she's a very talented actress. She had nothing to do. Sarah Snook even has some laughs in the beginning, but is dispatched obviously very quickly. She's the wife.
And
I like
then,
her.
So I think some important characters because they help Herschel. So Eliot, Glazer, and Kalen Allen play like an interracial gay couple who live in the village or wherever the hell he is, selling his pickles, and they're the ones who encourage him to sell them for more money and have a social media presence. They pop up several times, and they felt very forced. Mm-hmm. That situation wasn't funny to me either. I'm really curious to know what other people think about this film as it relates to the humor, because it feels very mild.
It does, and you know what? It feels like another film that sounded better on paper, like an interesting idea on paper with Seth Rogen starring than it turns out being, and having all the same people working together again. It's like, oh, you're probably more amusing to yourselves more than anything.
Yeah, when y'all are smoking weed and someone's house on the hill by the pool, this shit sounds hilarious, but in actuality, it's kind of dry.
It was a bit dry.
What would you give this movie?
2.5 out of 5.
I would give it 2.5 out of 5. I wanted to say 2.
And I kept, because you don't...
I'm going to say 2 out of 5.
Okay, good, fine. And you rarely hear the word pickle in titles these days, and I couldn't help, throughout this film, I was thinking of the Paul Mazursky film, The Pickle, from the early 90s, with Danny Aiello as that down on his luck filmmaker who's making a movie called The Pickle, which is the sci-fi film about people that bring cucumbers to a planet run by Little Richard where they only eat beef.
Okay, bye.